Hello, my name's Lee, and today I'm going to be talking you through sprint planning anti-patterns. First question is, what is an anti-pattern? The most simplest way to describe an anti-pattern is something that diverts you from the effectiveness of your process or progress. Essentially, this one, we're going to be looking at 20 sprint planning anti-patterns. Now, the business objective plus the team capacity plus the collaborative plan equals the sprint goal. We've talked in other sessions about how important it is to go into a sprint for sprint goal. Establishing the baseline then, the sprint planning exists to answer three empirical questions. Why is this sprint valuable? What can be delivered this sprint? And how will the work be achieved? And there's a warning here that Scrum relies on a delicate ecosystem of checks and balances. When boundaries blur, when capacity is ignored, value is dictated, anti-patterns emerge. This transforms agile frameworks into output-focused feature factories. And I've talked about output versus outcome in other sessions, so go check those out. We should look at the developers as the guardians of the how and capacity, the product owner as the guardian of the what and value, the Scrum Master as the guardian of continuous improvement, and the Scrum team as the ecosystem of collaboration. Scrum relies on clear boundaries. Anti-patterns occur when roles abdicate their responsibilities or overstep their bounds. This guide, as we mentioned, maps out 20 common dysfunctions directly to the roles that trigger them. So we're looking at the developers first then as the guardians of capacity. We'll go through their anti-patterns. So first one is capacity ignored. Overestimating capacity by ignoring public holidays, sick leave, corporate overhead, or required Scrum events. This guarantees failure to meet forecasts. Predictability is destroyed when the baseline capacity is an illusion. Absolutely think about your full capacity when you're going to your sprint planning. Think about those people that might be on sick. Think about holidays that have been booked, whether it's public holidays or known holidays that people have arranged. And any other overheads, meetings, and things that might interfere with the sprint. Zero slack time. Failing to request a standard 20% slack time buffer. This will overutilize and creates an I am busy silo mentality. Teammates become bottlenecks, impeding flow and collapsing self-organization. Also, that 20% buffer zone, when we're doing sprint planning, we kind of want to feel that we're going to sprint planning with a best case scenario sprint. We take in known risks and known issues, absolutely, and we plan around those. But we assume that what we have is what we've got and what will happen. Having that 20% buffer zone allows for a little bit of a scope creep, a little bit of contingency, and any other thing, and also with the sick leave and things as well that we mentioned in the first one. Looking at developers then with technical health and planning depth, so ignoring technical debt. We all do it. Not demanding capacity to fix bugs and refactor code. It triggers a downward spiral into a feature factory. Future product delivery capability steadily degrades. If you don't look after your technical debt, your future delivery capability will degrade. If you don't refactor code, your product is going to become glitchy. And if you don't fix bugs, you're never going to get the highest solution, highest value to the customer that you could offer. Over-planning details, attempting to plan every single subtask up front during the event, generates massive waste. The sprint backlog is emergent. Over-planning stifles adaptability. Absolutely. Have your sprint goal, understand the user stories and the user value that you want to achieve. And then with those user stories, those tasks are dynamic and they can emerge over the duration of the sprint. Zero planning, skipping the how discussion entirely. Missed opportunities for pair programming, knowledge sharing, and aligning architectural direction. If you miss planning altogether, you won't have a plan. Simple. Estimation and autonomy. Accounting for accounting's sake. Wasting valuable event time, estimating highly granular subtasks. Drains team energy and introduces administrative bloat without adding any empirical value to the sprint. I never get my teams to estimate subtasks. We estimate stories, and then the subtasks are the tasks that we identify or the developers identify they need in order to achieve the value of that story. If we completely misestimated, then we will understand that in a retrospective. We will look at that and we will know that for future in terms of what we learned and why we misestimated. The team lead dictator. A single senior developer creates the plan and actively assigns tasks to individuals. Alienates the team, destroys collective ownership, and explicitly violates the self-managing principles of Scrum. Yeah, it's a Scrum team. There's no I in team. So you may have a lead developer within your team. You may have someone who has more experience and more technical knowledge, and they can help guide the conversation, but everybody needs to be on board with the plan. So looking into the product owner then, the guardian of value and vision, missing the why, failing to align the sprint objective with the overarching product vision. The team lacks a focused, measurable sprint goal, reducing intrinsic motivation and turning work into a mechanical checklist. Absolutely. We're not looking at just getting things done. We're looking at the value. At the start of the sprint, what is the value that we can deliver to our customer this sprint? Why are we doing this sprint? The random assortment, proposing a disjointed random assortment of tasks with zero cohesion or business objective. Renders Scrum useless, indicates a weak product owner yielding to stakeholder noise rather than ordering by actual value. Absolutely. Understand the value that you want to deliver and then identify the stories that need to be completed in order to deliver said value. Preparation and boundaries, the unready backlog. Arriving with unrefined items, preparing a few tickets just an hour before the event. Planning becomes chaotic. The product backlog must be actionable 24/7 so the team can select the highest value work immediately. It's, if you look at DSDM or Agile PM, and they refer to it as a PRL, right? A prioritized requirements list. It is a backlog. It is a backlog of prioritized requirements. The highest priority at the top, the lowest priority at the bottom. The higher tickets get into the backlog, the more understood and refined they should be. They should be more ready. We talk about this thing, definition of ready, which is our kind of checkbox to make sure that tickets are ready to be brought into a sprint. And this is a guideline. If they don't have your refinement sessions that the new Scrum Guide actually refers to, then you're going to struggle to have a really well prepared backlog for your sprint planning. The 11th hour squeeze, forcing unready last minute changes into the sprint planning event, disrupts focus and signals that the product owner lacks the boundary setting skills to say no to assertive stakeholders. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody wants everything now, right? Everyone wants everything yesterday. But you've identified your plan, you've identified your goal, and you're working towards that value. If something comes in, then that conversation has to be had with stakeholders. It has to be a realistic conversation. I don't believe that you can always just say no. Okay, but if it's a real high priority that supersedes the existing priority, so therefore your sprint goal has changed, then you can. That would be a real worst case scenario, and I wouldn't recommend that for anybody. What I would always suggest to my stakeholders is, okay, yeah, we can absolutely look at that and we can prioritize that, but this will be done in the next sprint, and that sprint's are 2 weeks long. Sprint is only one calendar month or less, so it won't be too long before we get to that delivering that value. And that's the kind of joy of Agile. That's one of the things where we can accept changes late in development. Scope and spillover then, the output push, pushing developers to take on more work than they can handle, often weaponizing historical velocity, directly violates the developer's right to select their own work, accelerating team burnout and technical debt. The sprint backlog is the developer's backlog. It's the developer's plan into how they're going to achieve the sprint goal, which has been agreed with the product owner. Don't push on the developers to take on more work than they can handle. Unquestioned spillover, automatically moving unfinished stories from the previous sprint into the new one without discussion. Succumbing to the sunk cost fallacy, bypasses the critical empirical check of whether the unfinished item still holds business value. Just moving items over because you didn't achieve them in the last sprint to the next sprint. You haven't gone back and actually checked, has the value changed? With that sprint review, with the conversation, with the stakeholder engagement, is there a newer, higher priority that you want to bring in this sprint? And those stories are actually irrelevant towards achieving that. Always reassess, are those things still relevant and they're going to add the value that you're looking for? So the Scrum team then is the ecosystem of collaboration. Irregular sprint lengths, flexibly altering the length of the sprint to accommodate the size of the tasks. A dangerous start pattern that destroys cadence predictability. Teams must size work to fit the sprint, not the other way around. We have a few metrics that we use in Scrum, which are the most basic sort of metrics that we can look at, right? We have our flow metrics, our throughput, we have our velocity, story points, whether that's story points or whether that's actual the amount of tickets that we've achieved. And these are all based on sort of given estimates, and we know that an estimate is the wrong moment is wrong the moment that you've said it. And also, these are all based on averages over multiple sprints. And if you've ever read the book, The Floor of Averages, then that takes us into a bit of a red area as well. But it's all about understanding that these are guides. This is information, empirical data, which is historic data that's taken place that can guide us in making the right decisions to change the way that we perform going forward, to have that continuous improvement. Chronic overcommitment, routinely taking on too much work, resulting in 30 to 40% of the forecast rolling over to the next sprint. Degrades Scrum into a chaotic time box Kanban. The concept of a committed sprint goal loses all meaning. Absolutely. It's self-explanatory, right? You're not doing Kanban, so these things should not just keep going. Okay, you're working in sprints and iterations. Each sprint and iteration has a specific sprint goal and a specific value you want to deliver to the customer for that time period. So don't just chronically overcommit and just spill things over. The definition of ready, which I referred to earlier, right? Weaponizing the definition of ready as a dogmatic and flexible checklist to reject work, reintroduces rigid waterfall phases through the back door, halting valuable flow and cross-functional collaboration. Have a definition of ready, absolutely. Just don't have it so that it's so hard set in stone, and don't use it as a weapon to reject work, okay? Your definition of ready is something that the team should have created, and the team should understand, create this with the organization to know when something is deemed ready for them to pull into a sprint, okay? There shouldn't be a unified definition of ready given out by an organization to every single Scrum team. A Scrum team should be involved in creating their definition of ready to understand when their tickets are ready. Ignoring the definition of ready entirely, accepting unready, chaotic, or poorly defined items into the sprint backlog causes unnecessary disruptions mid-sprint, stalling momentum, severely endangering the sprint goal. Autonomy and participation then. The imposed forecast. The sprint forecast is dictated by a product owner, outside stakeholder, or a single tech lead. Outside influence negates self-organization. If the team does not own the forecast, they cannot own the commitment. Absolutely. It's a self-managing team, self-organizing team in the 2017 Scrum Guide, self-managing team in the newer Scrum Guide. Okay? Self-management, don't impose the forecast onto them. Planning in silos, only designated leads attend the planning event on behalf of the team. Transparency plummets, diverse voices are stifled, collective buy-in dies, and the risk of flawed technical decisions skyrockets. If you're not involved in a conversation and then you're just given a piece of work, you don't truly understand how that piece of work came about and why that was designated to you or why it's valuable, and you will always lose interest. Having just a technical lead going into a sprint planning event and leaving the rest of the team out of it, it doesn't allow them that vision of understanding the value that wants to be delivered. Have your team members. You will have seniority within your team, absolutely. So you will have junior devs, but sometimes the most inexperienced person has the biggest, newest, freshest idea. Okay, guardian of continuous improvement, ignoring the retrospective, failing to ensure that at least one high priority improvement item from the previous sprint retrospective is added to the new sprint backlog, halts the momentum of Kaizen, continuous improvement, the team stagnates, repeats the same systemic errors, and process evolution dies. Google James May Kaizen. There's a really interesting video of when he went to Toyota. If you want to understand Kaizen and continuous improvement, he went to the Toyota factory and he looked at Kaizen and how they incorporate it. But ignoring the retrospective absolutely is dangerous. It says here about adding a new item to the sprint backlog. I don't personally do that, okay? It's something you could do. The product backlog for me is to build a product. It's specific to that product. But I will store in other areas our retrospective actions, whether that's in reports, whether that's in a shared space with the team, and we will absolutely commit to at least one retrospective action to improve the sprint and the way in which we work. So how you do it is up to you, but don't ignore your retrospectives. Also, at the same time, if you've got 20 items in a retrospective, don't feel you've got to bring all 20 in. I guarantee if the retrospective item is important enough, it will continuously come up and you will get to see it again. Commit to what you can manage. Anti-patterns do not exist in a vacuum. The product owner, no preparation, triggers developers, too little planning, triggers which forces Scrum team, chronic overcommitment, resulting in Scrum Master ignoring retrospectives. Synthesis insight, fixing sprint planning requires holistic system thinking. Treating a developer anti-pattern without addressing the product owner behavior that triggered it will fail. Absolutely. Look at this from a holistic standpoint. The healthy sprint planning blueprints, developers, they want to relentlessly protect capacity, demand 20% slack time for technical health, and handle the how autonomously. The product owner should arrive with a clear vision, 24/7 actionable backlog, and strict respect for developer boundaries. As a Scrum team, commit collaboratively, maintain a strict cadence, and apply the definition of ready as a guide, not a gate. The Scrum Master institutionalized continuous improvement by forcing retrospective items into the sprint backlog. So there's a bit of guidance. There's some anti-patterns. There are many, many more, but some very specific to sprint planning. And when you're going through this, some of it you may be thinking, oh, we do that. That makes sense. Perfect. And hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight into understanding what you can do to help save it and improve it. And if you can't, at least now you understand what an anti-pattern is, and you can identify anti-patterns as you go through your sprint retrospective. And be transparent about anti-patterns, okay? With failure comes growth. So I hope this was useful, and I look forward to speaking with you. If you have any comments, stick them in the comments or email myself on the email provided, and I will be more than happy to talk to you through anything that's on my page. Thanks a lot.